Lena had always been drawn to abandoned places, the quiet thrill of exploring the unknown calling to her like a siren song. So, when she heard about the old deserted hospital on the outskirts of town, she couldn't resist. The locals whispered stories of strange occurrences and hauntings, but Lena dismissed them as superstitions meant to keep people away. Armed with a flashlight and her phone, she set out alone one evening, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The hospital loomed in the fading light, its windows dark and empty, the building a decaying relic of a forgotten past. Lena squeezed through a gap in the rusted gate and made her way inside. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and rot, the floor beneath her feet littered with debris. Her flashlight cast long, eerie shadows on the walls as she navigated the narrow corridors. The deeper she ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the occasional drip of water from somewhere unseen. She reached a door labeled morgue and hesitated, a chill running down her spine. It was just a room, she told herself, just another empty room. The door creaked loudly as she pushed it open. Inside, metal tables lined the walls, each one bearing the stains of a grim history. But it was the row of lockers at the far end of the room that drew her attention. They were body storage lockers, their doors slightly ajar, as if waiting for someone or something. Lena felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to open one. Her hand shook as she reached for the nearest handle, her heart pounding in her chest. She took a deep breath and pulled. The door swung open with a grating sound, revealing only darkness within. But as she peered closer, she saw it. A faint, almost imperceptible movement in the shadows. Her flashlight flickered and died, plunging her into blackness. Panic seized her and she fumbled with the light, desperate to get it working again. When it finally flicked back on, she wished it hadn't. The locker was no longer empty. A figure stood within, hunched and contorted, its skin pale and mottled, eyes wide and unseeing. Its mouth hung open in a silent scream, the soundless horror etched forever on its face. Lena stumbled back, unable to tear her gaze away, as the thing began to move, jerking and twitching as if struggling against some unseen force. The room grew colder, the air thick with a suffocating presence. Lena tried to run, but her legs wouldn't move, her body frozen in place. The figure stepped out of the locker, its movements unnatural, like a puppet on strings. It reached out a hand, fingers long and twisted, and touched her cheek. The skin where it touched her began to burn, an icy fire spreading through her veins. A voice whispered in her ear, low and malevolent, words she couldn't understand. The thing leaned closer, its breath cold and rank, and she could see now that its eyes were black pits, empty voids that threatened to consume her. With a final desperate effort, Lena tore herself away and fled, stumbling blindly through the corridors, the darkness closing in around her. She could feel it behind her, hear the scraping of its feet on the floor, the whisper of its breath on her neck. She burst out of the hospital, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until she reached her car. She fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking uncontrollably, and finally managed to start the engine. As she sped away, she dared to glance in the rearview mirror. The figure stood in the middle of the road, watching her go. Its twisted smile was the last thing she saw before she crashed into the trees. When the rescuers found her the next morning, she was alive but catatonic, her eyes wide and staring, lips moving in a soundless chant. They never understood what she was saying, and she never spoke again. But those who visited her in the asylum claimed they could hear it late at night, When the lights flickered and the air grew cold, the faint, distant sound of footsteps growing closer, and the whisper of something terrible that had followed her home,